Morph and Manifest enjoyers rejoice as these mechanics are back in Murders at Karlov Manor. But they look just a little bit different. Literally. Let's go over all the rules you need to know to take full advantage of the two new mechanics, Disguise and Cloak. Let's start with Disguise. Disguise is a variant of the Morph ability. For any card that has the Disguise keyword on it, you may turn it face down and cast it as a 2/2 creature with no name, subtype, or mana cost for just 3 generic mana. Just like a normal Morph card. However, unlike Morph, the disguised creature also has Ward 2, meaning if it were to become a target of a spell or an ability an opponent controls, while in play, counter that spell or ability unless they pay 2. Now, one thing to keep in mind, any effects or prohibitions that would apply to casting a card with these characteristics are applied to disguising a card. So for example, if your opponent controlled a Void Winnower, you would not be able to disguise any creatures. While disguised creatures don't have a mana value, the rules state that the mana value of an object with no mana cost is 0. And in Magic, 0 is considered even, so you literally can't even. Once the disguised permanent is in play, you may turn it face up at any time by simply revealing the card to your opponent to show its disguise cost, and then pay that cost. Just like with Morphs, turning a permanent face up this way is considered to be a special action and it doesn't use the stack. Most notably, this allows players to interact with cards that have split second. So in Commander, if your opponent casts something like Legolas's Quick Reflexes, you can turn either a Skin Thinner face up to destroy that creature, or a Void Mage Apprentice to simply counter the spell. Here's one extra tricky rule to keep in mind about morphed and disguised creatures. If someone enchants one of your disguised creatures with a card like Eaten by Piranhas, you will not be able to turn the disguised creature face up. This is because, in this case, Eaten by Piranhas has removed all abilities from the card. So when you turn the creature face up to show your opponent its disguise cost, it won't have one because it's lost all its abilities. The same interaction applies when attempting to turn Branch of Vitu-Ghazi face up while there is a Blood Moon in play. The front side of Branch of Vitu-Ghazi would be a mountain with no abilities, so there's no disguise cost to show and pay. Moving on to our next mechanic, we have Cloak. Cloak is extremely similar to Manifest. However, Manifest always took the top card of yours or your opponent's library and put it onto the battlefield as a face-down 2/2 creature. Cloak can happen from different zones depending on what the card instructs you to do. Etrata, Deadly Fugitive, can cloak the top card of someone's library, whereas Expose the Culprit lets you cloak face-up creatures you control. The cloaked creatures are treated just like disguised creatures. 2/2s with no name, no mana cost, no subtype, and Ward 2. Just like with Manifest, if the cloaked card is a creature card, you can turn it face up by paying its mana cost, or if it has a disguise cost, you can pay that instead. You cannot turn non-creature cards face up unless they have a disguise cost or are granted a special ability like the one from Etrata. Also, for both Disguise and Cloak, turning a card face up is not the same as changing zones. It's just like the classic transform cards like Delver of Secrets. So anything enchanting it, equipped to it, targeting it, or the counters on it remain the same. Unless of course your creature is now suddenly a tree branch, any illegally attached auras, equipment, and targeted spells will fall off or fizzle. Of course, the counters would remain in this case. Now, while that's everything you need to know from a mechanics perspective, there's a couple of other rules about face-down cards that apply here too. Firstly, with multiple face-down cards in play or on the stack, you must ensure that it's clear to your opponents the order in which these cards entered play. You are not allowed to mix up the cards to try and confuse your opponents. We're playing Magic the Gathering, not 3-card Monty. Secondly, if any face-down spell leaves the stack and goes to any other zone than the battlefield, or if a face-down permanent moves to any zone, you must reveal it. You also must reveal any face down permanents or spells you control if you leave the game or when the game is over. Now to wrap up the video, here's a secret rule that head designer for MTG, Mark Rosewater, mentioned in the Murders at Karlov Manor debut aftershow that previously applied to morph cards will also apply to disguise. The 5 mana rule. Any disguised creature that would destroy an opposing 2/2 in combat and survive, if it would be turned face up, will always have a disguise cost of 5 or more. That is to say, if you attacked your opponent with a grizzly bear and they had a face down creature with only 4 mana available, you can be sure that if they blocked your 2/2, even if that creature were to be turned face up, both creatures would end up dying at the end of combat in a worst case scenario, assuming no other effects or spells came into play. So be sure to keep this one in mind when heading into Standard and Limited. As always, if you learned something from this video, be sure to leave a like and let me know in the comments down below what you think of Disguise and Cloak. Subscribe if you know who done it, and I'll see you in the next one.